I don't know if any special meetings, let's see. Is there something on Sunday? I should look it up, huh? Nominating committee meeting, Sunday at 4:30. That's what I was thinking of. And then 1 week from this Friday is the ladies' Christmas tea, so be reminded of that coming up in just about 10 days. Okay, we're in number 16 tonight. We're on Bible Character Study number 31, Moses, Part J. And the page number at the bottom is page 50. This is out of Numbers 16 through 21. And we're kind of winding down the Moses section here in the next couple of weeks. So I'm going to read a couple verses for us out of Numbers 16. I'm going to first read the first 11 verses, and then I'm going to skip to verse 23 of the same chapter. So this is Numbers 16, starting at verse 1. Now Korah, the son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, with Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and On, the son of Peleth, sons of Reuben, took action, and they rose up before Moses, together with some of the sons of Israel, 250 leaders of the congregation, chosen in the assembly, men of renown. They assembled together against Moses and Aaron, and said to them, "You have gone far enough, for all the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is in their midst. So why do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord?" When Moses heard this, he fell on his face, and he spoke to Korah and all his company, saying, "Tomorrow morning the Lord will show who is his and who is holy, and will bring him near to himself, even the one whom he will choose, he will bring near to himself. Do this, take censers for yourselves, Korah and all your company, and put fire in them, and lay incense upon them in the presence of the Lord tomorrow, and the man whom the Lord chooses shall be the one who is holy. You have gone far enough, you sons of Levi." Then Moses said to Korah, "Hear now, you sons of Levi, is it not enough for you that the God of Israel has separated you from the rest of the congregation of Israel, to bring you near to himself, to do the service of the tabernacle of the Lord, and to stand before the congregation to minister to them, and that he has brought you near, Korah, and all your brothers, sons of Levi, with you? And are you seeking for the priesthood also? Therefore you and all your company are gathered together against the Lord. But as for Aaron, who is he that you grumble against him?" And then I'm going to skip over to verse 23 of the same chapter. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the congregation, saying, get back from around the dwellings of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram." Then Moses arose and went to Dathan and Abiram, with the elders of Israel following him. And he spoke to the congregation, saying, "Depart now from the tents of these wicked men, and touch nothing that belongs to them, or you will be swept away in all their sin." So they got back from around the dwellings of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. And Dathan and Abiram came out and stood at the doorway of their tents, along with their wives and their sons and their little ones. Moses said, "By this you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do these deeds, for this is not my doing. If these men die the death of all men, or if they suffer the fate of all men, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord brings about an entirely new thing, and the ground opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that is theirs, and they descend alive into Sheol, then you will understand that these men have spurned the Lord." As he finished speaking all these words, the ground that was under them split open, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up, and their households, and all the men who belonged to Korah with their possessions. So they and all that belonged to them went down alive to Sheol, and the earth closed over them, and they perished from the midst of the assembly. All Israel who were around them fled at their outcry, for they said, "The earth may swallow us up." Fire also came forth from the Lord, and consumed the 250 men who were offering the incense. Well, quite a dramatic scene here, isn't it? The earth opening up and fire. And once again, we're getting an insight into the life of Israel in the wilderness, and we find that there's still ongoing rebellion, even after all that they've been through. So on our question sheet tonight, page 50, Bible Character Study number 31, Moses, Part J. Question number 1, from what tribe was Korah? Levi. He's a Levite, and his name is actually something like Korach, and it means bald. Seems kind of a cruel name for parents to give a newborn, but that is his name. Number 2, what was Korah alone? From verse 1 and 2, no. And along with him were Dathan and Abiram and On. They're all Reubenites. They all rose up against Moses together with how many? 250 leaders of renown. So these are not just people. These are men that are proven leaders. They're well known. When it says men of renown, it means they're quite famous, actually, in their tribes and in all of Israel. Number 3, while it was true that all the congregation are holy, had Moses and Aaron exalted themselves above the assembly, and we can get help from that back in Exodus 3 and 4, had they taken this on themselves, had they lifted themselves up? No, actually it was God who chose them. God specifically said, Moses and Aaron, I have a job for you. So they were selected for this task by God himself. Number 4, what was Moses' response to this accusation? He fell on his face and told Korah and his company to bring censers of fire and incense in the morning, and God would choose between them. A censer, what is a censer? It's a smoke pot. It's usually made out of metal, brass as a common metal. And you have some coals, live coals that you put in it, and then you put incense. Incense is made up of say, myrrh and cinnamon and cloves, and so it's a smoke, kind of like a potpourri thing. It's smoking, and it's very, very, got a lot of potent odors with it, and that's what a censer is, a smoke pot. So Moses says, you bring your censers, and God is going to choose between us. Number 5, who did he say that Korah and his followers had gathered against in verse 11? The Lord. It was against God himself, not just against Moses and Aaron, but against the Lord. Number 6, what did Dathan and Abiram accuse Moses of doing? Well, they said that Moses and Aaron were bringing them out of an abundant land, they mean Egypt, to die in the wilderness and lording it over them, failing to bring them to the promised land and threatening them with violence. So they're accusing Moses and Aaron of really being tyrants and bad leadership. Number 7, in the morning all parties gathered at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and the glory of Yahweh appeared to all the congregation. After Moses interceded on Israel's behalf a third time, God warned the Israelites to get back from the dwellings of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. What did God do to deal with the sin of those men? Well, the ground split open, and the earth opened up its mouth and swallowed them and their households. So these men, along with their family, probably their extended family, the ground just opens up. It's like a giant sinkhole. And everybody just falls into this opening, but then it's not just an open pit. The ground closes back up. This is a supernatural judgment of God. And, everybody who is there sees this happen, and they are stunned and horrified, as they should be. This is awful, and Korah, Dathan, and Abiram brought it on themselves. They're the ones who caused this judgment to come. Number 8, what happened to the 250 rebellious leaders holding the incense burners, the censers? Fire came from Yahweh and consumed them. So fire apparently fell out of the sky, and out of the hundreds of thousands or millions of Jews gathered there, it burned up 250 individuals. Number 9, what happened to the incense burners? So the metal smoke pots that they'd all been holding, evidently they just drop on the ground when when they're burned alive, and these smoke pots are just there lying on the ground. Well, God says, here's what's going to happen. Question number 9. Eleazar, that's one of the sons of Aaron, hammered them out as plating for the altar as a sign to Israel that no layman not descended from Aaron should come near to burn incense. So this brass or bronze plating that are sheets hammered out of the smoke pots by Eleazar become the bronze plating for the altar of burnt offerings. And every time a Jew brings an animal for sacrifice to the tabernacle, they can see the altar there just inside the doorway and look at the plating on it and know those used to be censers for 250 men who were rebels. And so, it would be kind of a continuous reminder to the children of Israel not to rebel. So what is the concept that is taught in Numbers 16 and verse 40? Well, God gets to choose who and how worship occurs. So God is the one who dictates how we come to him and who is qualified to come to him. We can't make worship just whatever we want it to be. We're not allowed to do that. And it's got to be on God's terms, not ours. And so this bronze altar is going to be a reminder to the children of Israel from this point and for for hundreds of years. The altar of burnt offerings in the tabernacle is a continuous reminder to the Jews. Worship has to be done God's way, and we're not allowed to make it whatever we want it to be. So, question number 11, turn to 1 Peter 2, 9 through 10. We won't read it, but it is, well, you know what, we will read it. Let's take a look at it. 1 Peter 2. This is Peter, and he's writing to church-age saints, but he is drawing on the history of Israel. And so this is what he says in 1 Peter 2 and verse 9. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for God's own possession, so that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who's called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. For you once were not a people, but now you are the people of God. You had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. So Peter's using Old Testament language, a quote from the Old Testament, but he's applying it to Jews and especially Gentiles in the new era in the church age. And observe, he says, you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood. So this is one of the places where we understand that every Christian is a priest. Every believer is a priest before God, and it's not just the Levitical descendants any longer. That was true for the Old Covenant, but in this new system, the church, all believers are priests. Question number 12 on the sheet. Back to number 16. Amazingly, the rebellion is not finished. What did the Israelites accuse Moses and Aaron of in verse 41? Well, they said, you, Moses and Aaron, have caused the death of the Lord's people. After what they witnessed the day before, now they're getting together and said, Moses and Aaron, you caused all these people to die. Well, they're learning all the wrong lessons. They're not getting it. They're assuming that Moses and Aaron are to blame. It actually has nothing to do with Moses and Aaron, and it has everything to do with the rebellious and stubborn heart of the Jewish people. And once again, we're reminded that it's very easy to point our fingers at the Jews. Boomy and I were just talking before the service started tonight. The Jews got a lot of things wrong. How would we do if we were in their shoes? Would we be the ones to say, wait a minute, everybody, Remember yesterday how fire came out of heaven and burned up 250 people, and we saw the smoke pots drop to the ground? Do we remember that? And that was because we were grumbling and moaning and accusing God's leadership. How about if we back up a little bit and think before we open our mouths and accuse people? And so they weren't done with this rebellion, and they're accusing Moses and Aaron of causing the death of the 250 plus people the day before. Number 13, apparently this time God did not allow Moses the opportunity to intercede for the rebellious Israelites. What did Moses send Aaron to do? Well, bring his censer with the authorized fire, the holy fire from God, and incense to make atonement for the people. Aaron ran to stand between the dead and the living so that the plague was checked. It's quite a dramatic scene. So in response to this latest rebellion by the Jews, God says, I don't know what to do with these people. And he says, I'm going to destroy them. And a plague begins, a pestilence, a disease that kills people evidently like fast. And Moses says to Aaron, get your censer and run and make atonement. Intervene in this situation. Stand in front of God and make atonement for the sin of the people. So Aaron did. He took a smoke pot, he ran, and he saw where people were apparently just dropping dead. And he stood between the dead people and the living people with his smoke pot. And he's essentially saying to God, we repent. We're asking you for your mercy. We're pleading with you for your grace. And that checked the plague. So Aaron was the intercessor there. At the bottom of the page, number 17, God confirmed the authority he'd given to Aaron by causing his staff to blossom out of staves representing each tribe. Numbers 19 and 20 cover more laws and contain the probable location of a 37-year gap in the narrative as Israel wandered the wilderness as punishment and the older generation died off. From Numbers 20, I'm on question 14 now. Who died in verse 1? Well, that was Miriam. So Miriam was Moses' older sister. Number 15, by God's leading, the people had returned to one of their first encampments after the Exodus, waterless Meribah, where God had previously caused a river out of Psalm 105 to gush from a flinty boulder after Moses struck it with his staff. What did God command Moses and Aaron along with him this time in verse 8? Speak to the rock before their eyes. So this is the same rock out of which water had gushed at a tremendous rate to supply water for all the Israelites and all of their animals previously, 3 years or longer ago than that. And now they're back at that same location, and God says, take your staff, but don't hit it. This time you're going to speak to it. Just pronounce something to it. And God is going to perform a miracle again, and there's going to be water, but you're not to hit it. Question number 16, what did Moses do? He was very angry. He was really, really upset with Israel, all the rebellion, all the stubbornness, all the intransigence that's been going on for a long time. And he took his staff and he struck the rock twice. Well, that is not what God said to do. And so question 17, why was this sin? Well, we get insight from it in Numbers, but also in Psalm 106. It was a failure to obey. It was a failure to treat God as holy. And he spoke rashly, he acted rashly. And there's a deeper thing going on, too. Take a look in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. 1 Corinthians, the 10th chapter. And take a look at verse 1. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 1. For I do not want you to be unaware, brethren, that our fathers were all under the cloud and all passed through the sea, and all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and all ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink, for they were drinking from a spiritual rock which followed them, and the rock was Christ. It looks like God was intending to use this rock that gave water as a picture of Jesus Christ, the living water. And when Moses hit it the first time on their first trek through the wilderness, that was likely indicating the death of Christ. But Jesus only died once. And when Moses came back to the same rock and hit it again, that ruined the picture, that ruined the illustration that God was developing. And so it was simple disobedience, but it also marred a picture that God was creating. The rock gives living water. The rock is Christ. And so God was upset with Moses, and, well, we'll read about it here momentarily. So number 18, question number 18, who else was guilty? Aaron. Aaron was right there with him. Number 19, what was the consequence of Moses' sin? He would not be allowed into the promised land. God says, you because of your sin, because you would not obey me, you and Aaron are going to die before you get into the promised land. So that's quite a harsh punishment. Moses was 40 years old when he fled from Egypt. He was 80 years old when he began leading the Israelites, and he dies when he's 120, but he never got to go into Israel. God said, no, you're not allowed. Number 20, Israel is again on the approach to the promised land. Moses sends messengers to politely ask Edom for permission to pass through on a road called the King's Highway. Was Edom welcoming? No. Actually, Moses sent messengers twice. Said, we're just going to stay on the highway. We won't take anything. We won't bother you. If some of our animals drink some water, we'll pay you for it. We'll pay the market rate. And Edom said, no, if you come, we're going to attack you. So they backed off. Question number 21, the time had come for Aaron to die. Moses, Aaron, and Aaron's son Eleazar climbed Mount Hor, where the position of chief priest passed to Eleazar, and Aaron died. Why is Israel's mourning ironic? Well, just a few verses before this, Israel was saying, Moses and Aaron, they brought us out in the wilderness to kill us. And they take on all this authority. Who do they think they are? And now Aaron dies, and the entire nation just stops for 30 days to mourn the passing of Aaron. So a little inconsistent maybe. So now in Numbers 21, let me read for us Numbers 21. I'm going to read starting in verse 4 and going through verse 9. Then they set out from Mount Hor by the way of the Red Sea to go around the land of Edom, and the people became impatient because of the journey. The people spoke against God and Moses, why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no food and no water, and we loathe this miserable food. What does loathe mean? We can't stand it. We hate it. What's the miserable food they're talking about? Manna. This miraculous food that appears every morning when the dew evaporates. They've been eating it for 40 years, but they're now saying, we can't stand it anymore. Verse 6, the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, so that many people of Israel died. So the people came to Moses and said, we have sinned, because we have spoken against the Lord and you. Intercede with the Lord, that he may remove the serpents from us. And Moses interceded for the people. Then the Lord said to Moses, make a fiery serpent and set it on a standard, and it shall come about that everyone who is bitten, when he looks at it, he will live. And Moses made a bronze serpent and set it on a standard, and it came about that if a serpent bit any man, when he looked to the bronze serpent, he lived. Interesting, isn't it? So snakes, they came and they bit people, and people got sick, and many of them died. This is also referred to in the New Testament. You might remember that the Lord Jesus in John chapter 3, he said, if the Son of Man be lifted up. That's what this is. So you take a bronze snake, wrap it around a pole, and then you set it up in the center of the camp. It's high, it's tall, and anybody who gets bitten and looks at that, they're going to live. And now Jesus is saying, that was a picture of me, that bronze serpent. I will be lifted up on a cross like the serpent was on a pole. And people who look to me in faith will live. So, question number 22. After a brief but decisive victory by God's power, the Israelites again spoke against God and Moses when God sent fiery serpents that brought death as a consequence for their sin. What did the people say to Moses? We have sinned, intercede with the Lord. 23. At God's command, Moses made a bronze serpent and lifted it up. Those who were bitten could look at it and live. What did this odd statue symbolize? John 3:14, Christ on the cross. Number 24, after some travel toward the promised land, Israel asked permission to travel through the territory of the Amorites. King Sihon's answer was to go to war against Israel. What was the result of the conflict? Well, the Amorites were completely destroyed, and the Israelites took possession of all of their territory and their cities. Number 25, next, after spying out and conquering an area called Jazer, Israel approached Bashan, the region on the eastern bank of the Jordan River. This was later called Gilead. What was unusual about Bashan's leader, King Og, from Deuteronomy 3:11? His bed was made of iron, so iron was relatively rare at this point in history, and his bed was 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide. That's 13.5 feet long and 6 feet wide. I'm guessing Og was a big guy. You would not want to meet him in a dark alley at night. You would bump into his knees. Number 26, what kind of victory over Bashan did God grant? Total. It was a total victory. The Israelites left no survivors, no remnant, and took possession of his cities. So what lessons can we learn from these chapters? Don't just do the bare minimum. Don't just do what you think to be the right thing in your own way. Do it God's way. Follow his design. A very basic one that we see over and over and over again in the life of the Israelites in the wilderness. Don't grumble. Scott Van Dyne had a coffee mug that I was fond of. It said, no whining. That's pretty good advice. Don't whine. Don't grumble. Don't complain. If God has given you a load to carry, he'll give you the strength to carry it. But don't grumble against God. What else? Lessons. Yep. Amen. Okay, take your prayer bulletins and